my friend Kevin Goldsmith, who I will let introduce himself in just a second. His credentials certainly speak for themselves. I'll say it for him because it might be uncomfortable for him to say, but really like a pretty legendary CTO here, like a pretty untoppable resume and experiences working for some of the biggest brands that you can speak of. And now starting up on something that I'll let him talk to, a new adventure. Who they're certainly lucky to have you, Kevin. So maybe we could get kickstarted with a brief introduction of yourself.
Uh, Thank you. I would be the last person to say that I have an untoppable resume. There's a lot of people whose resumes I admire quite a lot. But yeah, I have been pretty lucky. I've worked at Microsoft for a long time. I was at Adobe for a long time. I was at Spotify for a few years there, and as a VP of engineering. And then since then I've been a CTO, primarily working in kind of machine learning and but different areas. So legal tech and edutech and fintech and and then I was at Anaconda for a couple of years most recently, but as of this week I am at CTO at gone back to music at DistroKid. So I speak to you today on my second day of the job at DistroKid, and that's why unfortunately I had to make a shift in my schedule, just completely unavoidable today.
No worries at all, and congratulations on the start of something new.
Yeah, thank you.
It seems highly appropriate too, because it was something that struck me when we first met on Zoom. Your kind of music studio setup behind you,
Yeah,
which is so cool.
I have it a little bit blurred out because there's a little bit of a mess today. So
fantastic. Well, I know one of the reasons we were talking among many, right, is everything to do with DevLake. You have some really interesting perspectives on metrics and analytics, and I know you're an interesting character, of course, Kevin. We had a really interesting discussion because I think you're rightfully a bit of a skeptic, when it comes to metrics. We talked a bit about Goodhart's law about how the metrics can become bad if they're used incorrectly. But I'm curious, maybe you could take us through a brief walk of like what's been your experience using different kind of measures and metrics as an engineering leader, and kind of what are your kind of pieces of advice that you maybe would give an engineering leader of like where metrics can go wrong, or even maybe anecdotes from your career would be very interesting.
So when we first, I think when we first met, you pitched the idea around engineering metrics to me, and I immediately just said, "Oh, that another one of those things." Because to be honest, over the years, many people have pitched me on this idea of having better visibility into what the engineering team is doing by doing smart things, observing the behavior of the team, and looking at their check-ins and the quantity of code in the check-ins and the number of check-ins. The challenge and concern I've had around this is that you're always just looking at a very small part of what a developer does, as well as every developer is different, every team is different. And so when you try and institute measures, you have a little bit of observer bias here. You have a little bit of also, Heisenberg uncertainty principle kind of things happening where, some of the best developers on the team may actually not be the ones committing the most code. They're the ones sitting next to the person, helping them with their code and those kinds of things that can't be measured by these semi-objective tools. And I've had different companies pitch me on why their solution was different because they also included Slack conversations, or they just tried to capture other parts of data. But in the end, it was still the fact that even if you could come up with these incredibly enveloping all 360-degree view of what a person does with their time and represent that in raw numbers, again, the challenge would be that the bias would come through in the observers, right? Even if I, the manager of the team was using really good, very smart, not leaning into how many check-ins did you do? Oh, how much code changed in every check-in? Because that's what I care about. Even if I was doing a much better, much broader picture, the numbers exist, the numbers are accessible, and my boss or the chief product officer or the CEO is going to start looking at these numbers going, well, it looks like this developer is working harder than that one. Well, why would you say that? Oh, they have more check-ins. Well, that's not necessarily indicative of how hard somebody's working. Well, no, but that's what I see. And then what you end up having is anytime you put a number to something, it's inevitable that people are going to want to game it. And if they game it, so it's one of the great things. It's not that I don't believe in metrics at all. I believe in like the Dora metrics and other kind of indicators of team health or company health. I live and breathe data, and I use it very much to do my job, but to make sure that the company and the organization is performing well. But I use metrics that even if you game them, the good things are happening, right? So even if somebody's like over, trying to, oh, we're going to make this number go higher, which generally, well, okay, well, congratulations, you made that number go higher, but that's actually a good thing anyway. So I'm happy that you're gaming it. If I tell the organization, or when I talk to my peers about looking at developer metrics or productivity metrics, a lot of them would tell me, well, no, we have these tools in place, but I didn't tell anybody we're using them. Only I know we're using them, which to me also seems a little big brother. And also you're afraid because you know that if you tell your team you're using them, they're going to start gaming them. And eventually they always figure it out anyway and start gaming them. So that was the thing, is if I'm looking at check-ins, people are going to check in more, which is good, except they're going to check in nonsense because they don't care. They're just trying to make their numbers look better than their peers so that they think that that's what's going to get them promoted. You asked for, there's a specific anecdote that we talked about, which was when I was an engineering manager at Adobe. I was, had the idea that we had a great bug tracking system, and I wanted to track everything in the bug tracking system. So, I had peers, who their teams were tracking bugs in email or tracking them in spreadsheets, even though we had a great bug tracking system. And so what I would do, I told my team, bug everything. Like, just I want everything in the bug system, just so we can find it. Right. I was really worried, a kind of common mistake engineering management. I'm worried we're going to lose this bug. So if you think it's bugged, just bug it and we'll review it. And what would end up happening is, because this was back in the days when we were still shipping on disks, right? So it wasn't like where we deploy today and we're deploying constantly. So we'd have, I'm telling people bug everything through the course of a release, the bug count goes up, way up. And then we get towards the end of the release, we're shipping, we have a ship date, we got to hit the date. So me, the head of test, me and my peers start really going through the bugs and like, do we need to fix this one? Do we need to fix this one? No, these aren't important. And what would happen is every release, we'd have this mountain of bugs grow, and then boom, the last, and then it'd go away because we would defer or close. No, it won't fix the vast majority because we were bugging everything. We were bugging stuff we were never going to fix anyway. So it looked, on the numbers, looked great. And at that time, Adobe had hired somebody from this other company to come in and really focus on quality in the organization, a quality czar. And this person looked around the organization, they saw this kind of behavior from my team, like, wow, we found all these bugs ourselves. No, other teams didn't find them in our code. And then we closed them and at the end of every release. And what they said to me was like, wow, your team's doing amazing. Like you're way ahead of the game and you really have your quality, locked down. And the answer was, no, we don't. We just bug everything. Like it was somebody just looking at the numbers, didn't really talk to me about my views on quality or what I understood about quality or how we tested or how we verified, anything like that. They just saw the numbers and the numbers looked good. And so they decided that what we were doing was better than what everybody else was doing. And I would never recommend anyone do what we did, because we would spend so many hours in bug review looking at stuff that was really nonsense, like totally non-user visible, non-user impacting. Somebody saw it and there was an edict for me, like, if you see it, bug it, because I don't want to lose it. It was just silly, right? So that's the kind of thing I think about when I think about a lot of these kind of things, that just look at your metrics.
Some really, really good thoughts there. And you really kind of gave me two mini epiphanies to a certain level, which is, I think perhaps that's really kind of part of what makes something like Dora, somewhat unique or magical, is it's sitting in that kind of perfect intersection where it's sufficiently abstract that it's not going to be overly gamed,
Yeah,
but it's also sufficiently actionable that you can actually respond to it. Because it's like, if you've got people that are saying, I'm going to figure out how to game improving stability, it's like, okay, cool, however you
yeah,
do that, it's a good thing. So, but if you say, hey, I'm measuring lines of code, obviously that just leads to useless or even malignant behaviors. So it's an interesting idea, and I think it's a good takeaway for our listeners on both today and the recording is, I think what Kevin is really getting at, which is an important reminder, is you really have to think about, if you are putting a metric into action, like what behaviors might that really be kind of incentivizing and motivating? And does that really map to the outcomes that you want for users, customers, for the business? So really, really great thoughts. And I'm curious, Kevin, to kind of seize the moment a little bit with you starting on a new adventure. I'm curious, when someone like yourself who's been around the block kind of steps into a new role, what are the kinds of things that maybe you're kind of looking to kind of identify or understand to really orient yourself? Because it seems like you're coming into a fairly large organization, fairly large team. What kind of, whether it's metrics, whether it's indicators, whether it's kind of touch points, like what are the kind of health checks that incoming CTO might really kind of pay attention to?
I think the most important thing, is that you come in with sort of beginner's mind, for lack of a better word. Like, you don't come in with preconceptions. You don't come in with, obviously, as part of the interview process, or if you know people at the company, you're gonna have heard things, especially at my level, like you've talked to the CEO, you've talked to the board. They're telling you what they think is going well, what they think is not going well, and of course you listen to it. But the best thing you can do is to come in very open-minded, talk to everyone, as many people as you can, and get all of their perspectives. What they from what they're where they are, what do they see? Because what you're trying to do is understand the system that's been put in place, right? So if you go back to these ideas from systems thinking, a group of people are working together. There's a system or multiple systems that are working together here, and what people see is they don't understand the entire picture. What they understand is what their view of it is, what's working well and what's not working well. And so coming in, you have the benefit of being a person that is like, nothing there is your fault, right? And so nobody has a problem telling you that I don't like this. This doesn't work right, because what they're hoping is you'll agree with them and fix it in a way that makes them happy. So you get this brief moment where, no one's blaming you for anything, and everyone's hoping you're going to fix the things that bug them. And so they're very happy to tell you what they want to see differently. And by getting that picture from lots of different angles, you can start to sort of visualize the system for itself, and maybe understand, well, what this person sees is this thing isn't happening, and they really want it to happen. And so they think that you just need to yell at the people responsible for that thing. But if you talk to that team, what they're saying is they're always waiting on this other team that no one can see, because it's all nested underneath them. And so by getting all these different views, you start to sort of see, like, it's like looking at a car, trying to diagnose a problem in the car. There's so many different systems going. You sometimes it'll be something very awkward, or a really good bug, right, on top of a code that's on a very sophisticated architecture. Sometimes it's a very low level bug, and you have to kind of deep dive through the system to figure out what's going on. So that's I think kind of the most important thing coming in is just coming in with no preconceptions, coming in with no like I know, you know, there's stuff I certainly believe in, and there's things I think are important generally, but I'm never going to come in with a this is what I'm going to do A, B, C, D, and E before I even meet anybody.
Yeah, that makes lots of sense. I think that's a really valuable takeaway, especially for maybe those who are getting started in their career being very metrics or analytics oriented, right? Is
Yeah,
yes, those things can be accurate, but or maybe they can be precise, right? But they're not necessarily accurate without that context. And that's really the role of the leader, is harmonizing like what is this data showing versus what's the context telling me about that data, and what does that really mean, in kind of practice. I
yeah.
think it's a really important thing to be mindful of.
Even the the company metrics that are definitively important, revenue, churn, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's different in different contexts, right? Different businesses care more about one of those than they care about another. And so yeah, even the sort of definitively good metrics or data you want to watch, what is good in in the context of this organization is always going to be different.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. One of my favorite kind of leadership principles that I was taught earlier in my career, it was like cheesy as it sounds, is like seek first to understand,
Yeah,
and exactly that, which I love that that's the point you're raising there.
yeah, absolutely.
And you touched upon kind of two really kind of potentially, hot button words, perhaps even four-letter words for some, which is quality and productivity. And
Hmm.
I'm curious, when you think about those two kind of abstract concepts, Kevin, when you think about like quality code or like quality engineering, like
Yeah,
what kind of things come to mind for you? Like what does quality really mean in the end?
quality is an interesting kind of measure because it is always subjective, right? You can say, well, all the unit tests pass, and we have high code coverage. Um, Therefore, we have a quality product. But to your users, that may not, or your customers, that may not be the case, right? Because the UX might be horrible, right? Or other things like everything passes, but your performance is bad. And so it's always going to be this sort of holistic measure. And of course, that's a really unsatisfying type of thing for those of us who are engineers, right? We like numbers and we like having things, and I'll just measure more things to define quality, and that'll give you a hint towards it. But it's always going to be, that's why I do tend to look more at the business numbers, right? If your quality is bad, your churn is high, right? Or if your churn is high, maybe it's because your quality is bad. It might be you just have a crummy product. But those are the kinds of things I pay most attention to, because those are the things that are actually impacting the business and my ability to collect a paycheck, right? So I look at all these other metrics too, like code coverage and number of tests and performance and response times and availability and all those kind of great metrics that we all care about. But to me, it's always going to be, how are these things impacting the business metrics? There's a story I love to tell about quality, because I really did. I came out of work on operating systems and lots of other things, and very serious quality organizations. Because at one point I worked on Windows CE, and our stuff was going into voting machines and CAT scans and stuff like that. The company was very, very serious about quality because the impact was pretty significant. Um, but you know, I was at Spotify for a number of years. I was in charge of the consumer engineering organization. So that meant like the mobile apps, the desktop app, the web app, all the ingestion, streaming, storage, all that kind of stuff. And I had a very data driven organization. I had thousands of metrics and great dashboards at my fingertips all the time. And there was a debate within the company. One team, one of the platform teams, had decided that my team wasn't serious about quality, because what they were seeing is the crash reports coming back from Apple and Google. And so they were saying, your team isn't focusing enough on quality. And one of the product managers said, well, no, we think it's fine. And no, and there was a big debate. So what he did is he had his team build in something into the mobile product that just crashed the app randomly. So, people tend to use Spotify all day, for long periods of time. It's different. This is what I was saying. Context matters, right? If I'm playing a game for 5 minutes, 5 times a day, a crash is a big deal. If I'm listening to music for 10 hours a day, a crash, is that a big deal or not? We don't know. So he crashed the app and then measured churn. And what he found was the number of times in a day that that the app could crash that users wouldn't mind, right? Above that number, users would drop their subscription. Below that number, nothing changed. Their usage pattern didn't change. They just, and restarted the app. And so we had that number then. So we quantified it. And then would that number, could your product, whatever your product is, could it crash that many times a day? And no, it's different. It's a very different experience. But the point was, rather than think about number of bug reports coming or number of user complaints or whatever, he just did a very data driven, we're going to find out exactly how many times a day we can crash the app, and how that will affect the business. And so that was like a very smart approach to quality. Not saying every company should do that, but you should be thinking about it more in terms of what's your user experience, what does that do to your business metric.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's a great point too, to bring it back to like the simple fundamentals, right? Of like what actually impacts the end result, and how do you back into that with different measures that can translate to directed behaviors.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to kind of take the same kind of question format towards kind of productivity, which I know is always, a contentious topic in any field, but I think especially in engineering, because there's so many ways to think about it, and of course so many ways to incorrectly or kind of game it. And I'm curious, Kevin, when you kind of think about, someone says like, hey, I have a really productive team, or our engineering organization has had a really productive quarter. For you, like what does that ultimately mean, and how do you think about measures of productivity in that kind of context?
I tend to, again, it is always subjective. So what you might call a highly productive team, I might call team does okay. The other thing too, by the way, what I've seen, because I've been lucky enough to be part of organizations that are, compared to all my experience, have been just incredibly productive organizations. You become acclimated, no matter how good your organization is, and how productive you are, and how efficient your team is, and how much stuff you get done in a day. Over time, that becomes the normal. And then what I've seen, and then everyone's complaining like, oh, it takes forever to get things done. Like, we thought of this feature yesterday and it hasn't shipped yet. Like, what's going on? Like, we used to be so fast, right? And you're like, how many teams would kill to ship a feature in a month or a quarter, and you're complaining that it's taking more than 24 hours? That's a great one. That's recognizing when you have this kind of sort of luxury problems. But when somebody says their team's productive, I really look at that. And it is one of the reasons when I read the book with the door metrics, I really appreciate it, is because those kind of are a lot of the metrics I care about, which is how fast can I bring value to my customers or to the people that are using the thing I built. And that's, to me, the most important thing, is how quickly is my team delivering value to the people who use our stuff. And we've figured out, like I said, I used to ship software on CDs. I used to ship software in hardware, right? Where, you'd get updates when you bought a new machine. So I'm used to multiple years of development before a release. Like, that's the early part of my career. Today, you can ship I can ship a new thing every time I save in my editor if I really want to, right? I could save, file watcher checks it in, CI/CD, it's live in 10 minutes, whatever, 5 minutes. And if I want to, like, there's no anything I'm putting between the code and the user is a choice, right? And because of that, that's the kind of stuff I look for when I think about efficiency. So in order to get value to users faster, are you breaking things down into smaller pieces of work? Do you have your enough confidence in your systems that make sure that whatever you're putting into the hands of people is going to be something that's going to make them happy, is going to work in the way they would want it to? Those kinds of things, that's the stuff I look at as like the number one important thing. And then is the work that your team's doing, is that actually moving the product forward? Is that actually moving the business forward? Are you doing the right things? Right? I can fix all the white space in my code and ship it, and it's got zero user impact. It's not going to do anything of value for anybody, and that's okay to do that stuff. I mean, you've got those kind of things you want to do to improve your readability, improve your long-term maintainability. But if that's all I'm doing and I'm adding no value for users and it's not improving the business, my team might be doing a lot of stuff, but it's doing a lot of stuff to very little effect. So that's the stuff I really look at.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And being respectful of your time here, Kevin, I know we've only got 3 minutes, and I want to make sure we
Yeah,
finish on time.
I
So
apologize. I apologize to the folks here and the folks watching.
no worries, no worries. We're all thankful to have your time, um, and hopefully in the future we can do another one. But perhaps as kind of a closing question, I'd love your perspective. I think the idea of like what a CTO does can be fairly abstract, even to
Yeah.
veteran engineers. And I'm curious for you, like what does kind of like a typical week in the life of a CTO, look like from Kevin Goldsmith's seat?
I'm going to look backwards instead of forwards. This week is like any onboarding week for me, for anybody. Lots of forums and reading and meeting people. CTO work is a lot different. I think, especially if you're like me, if you're a CTO at a very early stage company, you're probably writing a lot of code. That's still probably a big part of your job. If you're CTO at kind of Series A company, that might still be part of your job, or maybe you're just managing a small team. I tend to work at larger startups, still startups, but larger startups, usually in the couple hundred, 100 to 500 type size companies. And for that, it's depending on the company, it's always different, but I tend to be much more involved in the tech. I'm the technical person representing in a lot of other contexts. So I might participate in sales calls if they need to talk to, if it's a big customer and they want a CTO in the call with them. I might be at a conference meeting users. I might be negotiating deals with vendors, or um, partnerships, or looking at acquisitions, those kind of working with the finance team on budget, all those kinds of things. It's kind of different than any other engineering organization role. So it's much more, a CTO role is a business role as much as it is a technology role. At the same time, I'm going to be producing like documents for my organization around kind of long-term architecture. I'll be working with the architects or the senior engineering folks to make sure like we're doing things in a way that I think is sustainable. We're doing things in a way that makes sense. I'm going to be working with the engineering managers or the directors on sort of diagnosing issues in the organization and helping them resolve them. I'm going to be mentoring and growing the leaders. I probably am more focused on day to day on the leaders of the organization, the managers of the organization, than I'm on the individuals. But at the same time, I'm going to be doing things like making sure we have good training for the individuals. So it's a much more a role that, and one of the reasons why I like this role is you're thinking about like how to make the organization work well, how to make the company work well, and you're representing that organization to the rest of the business. So I work a lot more closely with like marketing and sales and finance and all those kinds of things, um, than I do a lot of times with, getting, I will get into the nitty gritty if we have a outage or something and help diagnose and then make sure that we're taking care of it. But, a lot of my time is spent kind of looking out, sideways, as opposed to just really 100% of my time focused down. That's one of the things that makes the CTO role a bit unique in engineering roles.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and I think it just really kind of highlights the importance of keeping all of those skills sharp as you look to expand and grow your career. That it goes well beyond the code base, right, and it
Yeah.
touches every part of the business ultimately.
And for those who aspire to be CTOs, I'll tell you, I had to learn it on the job. No one taught me, but I had to care about it. I had to be interested. I had to be inquisitive. I had to have beginner's mind and want to learn about marketing and sales and finance and all those kinds of things, in addition to just caring about the technology and just caring about the code.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're 1 minute over here, and
Yeah.
guys, we've got to let Kevin go. He's about to be introduced to a couple hundred people, I think, in his new role. So we're lucky to be the first people to see him today, though. So Kevin, I'm so thankful to have your time today, and this interview was awesome. And I'm looking forward to all of our conversations near and far. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Maxim.
We'll see you soon.
See you.